The mitzvah Divrei Torah.
Sok b'divrei Torah. I see Aviva. Shabbat Shalom, Aviva.
Shabbat Shalom, Abba.
How are you feeling, Aviva? Yeah, okay.
Why do you ask?
Well, because we just had a conversation about how do you ever respond to that honestly, anyhow. Okay.
Actually, my honest response whenever somebody says, so, how are you feeling? What's going on? Is, thank God.
Blaming God for everything. Yes, the theodicy is powerful. I don't agree with it, but powerful. And that's good. Okay. Now, tonight is a Jewish holiday. Tonight is a Jewish holiday. If you know, raise your hand. Tonight is a Jewish holiday. I see a few hands. Okay. All right, Cindy, what's the holiday?
Lag BaOmer.
Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, is tonight and tomorrow. Now, Lag BaOmer is considered to be a scholar's holiday. There are all kinds of reasons. I'm not going to go into them now. It's considered a scholar's holiday. But it's also a birthday. For reasons that are not 100% historically accurate, Lag BaOmer is connected to the birth of one of the great movements in Jewish life. Any guesses? No, it's not my birthday, and I figured, some of you would come up with that. Steve?
Kabbalah.
Kabbalah. Where'd you come up with that?
Well, it's using numbers, it's using time of year, it's putting all of these things together that would make sense to me.
Well, that's a very disappointing answer because I expected this conversation to go on a little bit longer. The Lag BaOmer is considered in weird ways be the time of the birthing of Jewish mysticism as a movement. Kabbalah and Zohar. How does this work? I'm going to tell you a story. I like this story, and I haven't told it to you before, so I'm going to tell it to you, and you can kind of close your eyes if you want. When the Romans outlawed the study of Torah, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai refused to stop teaching Torah. The Romans said, if you teach Torah, you will die. Shimon Bar Yochai continued teaching Torah. The Romans pronounced a death sentence against Rabbi Shimon, and he was forced to go into hiding. He brought his son Elazar with him, and they fled to a cave in the northern region of Israel. They had no means of eating, but miraculously a carob tree popped up and a stream of water, and there they remained in the cave for 12 years. They remained in the cave for 12 years, involved only in the study of Torah. One day, Elijah the prophet came to Shimon came to the cave and announced that the reigning Caesar had died, and the decree against Rabbi Shimon for teaching Torah was lifted. Rabbi Shimon and his son came out of the cave. They looked around and for the first time saw other people, and they saw other people, normal people, farming the land. Rabbi Shimon was shocked that Jews were farming the land and not involved in the continuous study of Torah. How could anyone forsake eternal life by indulging in mundane, worldly pursuits? Rabbi Shimon looked at the farmers with great flames emerged from his glance, and he consumed the farmers. They were vaporized due to the power of Rabbi Shimon's spiritual stature. At this point, a bat kol, a heavenly voice proclaimed, "You are not to destroy my world. Go back to your cave." Rabbi Shimon and his son returned to the cave in order to better learn how to control their spiritual powers. At the end of the year, a voice from heaven, a bat kol, said, "Enough, you've learned." Rabbi Shimon then said, "I have held secrets close to my heart. Before I die, I wish to reveal all the secrets of the universe." And he began to dictate his learning. The scribe reported, "I couldn't even lift my head due to the intense light emanating from Rabbi Shimon. The entire day, the house was filled with fire, and nobody could get close due to the wall of fire and light. At the end of the day, the fire finally subsided, and I was able to look at the face of Rabbi Shimon. He was dead, wrapped in his tallis, lying on his right side and smiling." Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is considered by traditionalists, not by historians, to be the author of the Zohar. The Zohar, the bright shining light, which is the source book of the Kabbalah. Tell me, what lessons can you derive from this well-known and very powerful story about the origins of the Kabbalah and the Zohar? What can you learn? What does it say to you? Don't be shy. We've never done this before, and that's okay. What does it say to you? I'm waiting. Oh, I see. Thank you. Thank God for Rebecca. Okay.
That there needs to be a balance between religious belief and obtaining a religious life. There needs to be some kind of balance.
Thank you. And I'm not going to comment on that. I'm just going to hold it. And now that'll open the door for other people to comment as well. What does this story come to teach? What's it about? Any other thoughts?
Intransigent.
Pardon? Ray.
Thank you. Responding only to the story as filtered through you, so perhaps I get some coloring there. I am hearing it as an inconclusive statement of the paradox, which it doesn't solve, of the tension between a fully uncompromised, spiritually devoted life and the practical matters of living our normal lives. And nobody more than farmers would seem to be a practical example of what we need simply to eat and live. And I don't hear the story saying one is wrong or the other is wrong. And I don't hear the story solving the problem of having to live in the tension between those two things. And I think the death of Rabbi Shimon with the smile on his face perpetuates the paradox. I think it tells us this life and this story did not solve this conflict, but here was a man that at least we understand his spirit seemed happy making his choice. But at the same time, we know we need the farmers.
You have to admit that the best way to perpetuate a paradox is to die with a smile on your face, right? I mean, that, you got no better response than that. Okay, anyone, thank you. Anyone else want to come in on that? No other hands. Rebecca's hand is up again. Rebecca?
Well, the story is perpetuated in the way the religious Jews live in Israel, and all the controversy that they have now with the men serving in the military. Isn't that a continuation of this paradox?
It is indeed. It is. Any other comments? Any other comments? I find this story very, very powerful. Very powerful. What does it assert? It asserts that there is mystery hidden in existence. It asserts that. And that part of the spiritual search is to uncover that mystery. That's here. There is mystery in existence. And remember, this is not cultic off to the side Judaism, right? Judaism is asserting there is mystery. And part of our purpose in life is pursuing that mystery. Tomorrow.
By connecting it with the Zohar, with the Kabbalah, it is also saying that all of us have the potential of actually getting close to that mystery if we start with the Zohar, and that this will give us access to what Shimon Bar Yochai experienced and was able to do.
Boy, it's a call to touch the Zohar and to seek the truth. Hidden mystery. Mara.
I also think it's interesting that since this Torah portion contains the sabbatical year,
Yes.
that it suggests to me notions of defining ownership, and that you can define ownership in spiritual ways as well as the mundane, so that owning land as farmers do is one way of connecting with the world God's created. And there are also ways to spiritually access, quote unquote, the land of the Jews.
Thank you. I'm going to say something which, if I had the capacity to turn off the recording briefly, I would do that. But let me just offer this. This story also is a warning. Watch out for the ego of religious leaders. Watch out, because that ego can make them destructive in their claim to possess the truth. And how often does that occur in human history? A lot. A lot. When you have religious leaders, the word pontificating comes up in it. I didn't mean to refer only to the Catholic Church. That when religious leaders dictate the truth and will kill to preserve their vision of the truth, watch out. Because even the greatest of religious leaders can become murderers of those with whom they disagree. Is that scary? The image of Shimon Bar Yochai coming out of that cave, brushing himself off because actually he lived in a hole in the ground for 12 years, brushing himself off, looking around and with an angry stare, incinerating people who were living not according to his vision, is frightening in our own day. Absolutely frightening. Okay, I see Brad.
Yeah, Rabbi, after he was condemned for, after his condemnation of participating in the mundane world, and he's sent back into the cave, didn't you say that he saw the light, he saw the error of his ways? Didn't he then come to terms with both the participation in the spiritual world and in the mundane world?
Yes, and that is core of Zohar. Yes, that is core. He wasn't condemned. He was condemning the farmers, the whatever, the people who were out working and not studying Torah 24/7. Be careful what you judge and how you judge. And who are you to judge? And in a sense, Shimon Bar Yochai came out with such a purified vision, nobody could live by it. Think of that. A purified vision which required the destruction of the earth. And the Bat Kol, the divine voice, said to him, back off, go back in your cave for a year, think through what has just happened, and learn from it so that your truth can be a positive factor in building the world. Pure truth isn't enough. I also wrote in my little note here, the mysteries and richness of Torah study are endless. Think about what we do on a daily basis. I don't know if at the end of our sessions you would dare look in a mirror and perhaps see your faces illuminated by flames because of the encounter with Torah. I'm not sure. I don't go looking right away into the mirror. But the world is much more than what we see. But the world is what we see. Did that make sense? Yeah? The world is what we see, but the world is much more than what we see. And Shimon Bar Yochai is attributed to being the one who opened the doors to the inner world of Kabbalah, of mysticism, and of truth. I could go on. And it reminded me of my favorite now deceased Canadian singer, Leonard Cohen, who did sing once about light emerging from brokenness and trying to find that light is a fair goal for those who want to encounter Jewish mysticism. Don't blow it off. Give it a place in the world of your thinking. That's all I could say. Any further comment, Tamar? Your hand is up. Is that still you? Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you for this. My comment is trivial. One of the intriguing things when reading the Zohar is that it always takes place, all the scenes are taken place outside under a tree. Shimon Bar Yochai is teaching people in the Zohar while they all gather around trees. So they're always in nature. And that is so odd given his outlook and attitude in the Talmudic story. I don't know what to do with it, but I found it, every time a tree shows up, they're going to sit down and talk about Torah.
And I am so miserably assimilated that when you talked about Shimon Bar Yochai and how he taught, where did the Buddha teach?
Under a tree.
Under the bo tree, right? Be careful. I mean, that's how an apple fell, in gravity and everything. Be careful when sitting under a tree. You never know what could happen. But under a tree, and then the symbolism of the tree is so powerful. So powerful. I'm going to stop with this. Otherwise, we go into a full-scale thing on Kabbalah. But Mara, this was intended to be a gift to you. And to you, happy birthday for the Zohar and the Kabbalah and all of your friends. And I hope you're going to have a nice party tonight. Oh, with Harv. Okay, cool. I'm glad we had that chance. Now, mention was made of the fact that periodically on Shabbos morning, we study our Torah portion. And the Torah portion is Bahar. It's the second last Torah portion in the book of Leviticus. And it very often is a combined Torah portion with next week, Bahar and Bechukotai. And I really enjoy Bechukotai next week because it talks about all of the curses. I love that because I have a whole bunch of curses that I'd like to visit on my enemies. And the people say, well, don't do it. Well, I'm quoting Torah, so it can't be all bad. But Bahar is a very, very, very interesting topic. In it, and I want to get to the reference here. There we go. Let's go into Leviticus 25. There are interesting things here.
What page?
Not yet. I'm flipping. Let's see. I'm in Bechukotai, so I can go backwards. I'm in Bahar. I'm in 800. And I'm in 850. Yeah, 850. 850.
Thank you.
Something is going on in Bahar, which strikes me as massively important in a very brief Sedra. The first thing that's going on is an ordering of time. Time is ordered in our Sedra, okay? What does that mean? What does that mean? Everything begins with Shabbat. all of Jewish life and teaching, everything begins with the ordering of time. It begins with Shabbat. We are a Shabbat afflicted people. And for those people who never give Shabbat a thought, you have to realize that you are cutting yourselves off from one of the great organizing principles of Jewish life. It doesn't mean that we all have to go out and observe Shabbat, but we have to be aware 6 days God created, boom, Shabbat. Shabbat, week after week, Shabbat. But then, Shabbat, which is good for us, what's the next organizing principle in this Sedra? The sabbatical year. The sabbatical year, organized around Shabbat. Except in this case, you have 6 years, you work your land. The 7th year, you hold off. Sabbatical year. That's the second organizing principle. And the third organizing principle dealing with time is the Jubilee year. The Jubilee year. Now, there is great controversy as to whether the Jubilee year ever actually occurred. And I'm not going to get into the controversy. But as a principle, it is what I would call restorative justice. The time comes when if you had to sell your property or get rid of property because of financial stress, at the end of a jubilee, a 50-year period, the land returns to the original owners. Time, Sabbath, sabbatical year, jubilee year. Good for the individual, good for the people. But now we're going to get to the second part. Steve.
And also, it's a little, to me, disjunctive on time. It begins with God talking to Moses on Mount Sinai. Are we back at Mount Sinai, or are we referring, does this refer back to when Moses was up on Mount Sinai back in the middle of Exodus?
Okay, so you have a couple of principles, good question, operating here. One is Ein Mukdam Umuchar B'Torah. There is no chronological order to what is written in the Torah. That's a rabbinic dictum. So every time someone would say, hey, this seems out of order, they throw at you Ein Mukdam Umuchar B'Torah. That's how they handled that. Secondly, the rabbis believed that at Mount Sinai, the broad stroke legislation was revealed to Moses. But during the rest of the wandering period, Moses would go into the Mishkan, to the tabernacle, and there God would fill in the details. And so Moses had 40 years to pick up the details. Well, actually, about 40 years. Pick up the details. Rarely does what Steve picked up occur. The statement, God said this at Sinai. And so this is one of the rare occasions in which the details are considered to be directly revealed at Sinai, an unusual occurrence. Steve, did I respond to you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, but it's a great question. It's a great question. But to Bahar Sinai, God spoke at Mount Sinai and did it. What do you learn about the nature of human existence from this focus on time and land? time, and land. What do you learn? Poverty is very near at hand, at the door. Poverty is an immediate concern. And much of the Torah tries to focus on the reality of poverty. And knowing that we can't ignore it, we have to deal with it. If they come up with a fantasy about returning all the land at the end of 50 years, they also say that when you don't harvest your fields in the seventh year, what happens to the stuff that grows by itself? What happens? What happens? Okay, Rebecca.
It goes to seed. It turns to seed.
It could do that, but there's more than that. Yes, Tamara.
It is to be collected by the poor people and the widow and the orphan and the like.
When you guard the land, you are making provisions for the battle against poverty. Do you see the connection? Time, land, and exquisite values. You can't harvest, you can't sell, but surely you can open the gates of your fields and let the poor in. There are also all kinds of other legislation we know about, like when you are harvesting the fields of your land, don't harvest the corners. Don't harvest the corners? Why? So that the poor can gain food. But how do they gain food? By going to a food market? They gain food by going out in the field, preserving their pride, and harvesting the corners that were left. They harvest the food that becomes their food and preserve their dignity. If you want to know, are there core values of Torah which are totally fundamental to what Torah is trying to teach? Poverty is not far away. These rules in Bahar, restorative justice. And then one last comment. Inherited wealth is one of the core causes of human suffering. Think about that. You have to sell your property. Some conglomerate buys it, and they gather property and property and property. But at the end of the 50 years, even though it probably never happened this way, the power of inherited property yields to the need of the individual for economic security. There are those people who would claim, there's a lot written about this. Folks, there's a lot of nascent socialism inside the Torah. I don't want to take position on this, but actually there is. Tamara, and then I see Mara.
Yeah, I know every time I read this, I go where you just went, how important it would be if America or other countries had some equivalent way of restoring the economic balance, because where we are now economically is disastrous for everybody. And this major book called Capitalism by Tom Piketty a few years ago pointed precisely to this point, that people with money keep getting more and more and more and more, and the rest are getting less and less, and it spirals. And this system, even if we don't follow it exactly, tinkering with it allows for restoring economic sustainability. And it's also teaching that even the land is not there for you to exploit. So it is such an important teaching against greed and unlimited grasping, whether it's the land or each other's property.
By the way, Piketty is a name to be read and studied. Piketty, Pikety, right? Piketty, yeah. Mara.
I think this is partly along the same lines. What interests me is that in Leviticus 25, verse 2, the statement is, then shall the land keep a Sabbath.
Yes.
And that's interesting to me because it implies you can't have ownership. It's the land that keeps the Sabbath. You don't keep the Sabbath for the land. And it also brings up a question in my mind that if that's true, if that verse implies that we can't actually have ownership of the land, then how does that affect our insistence that the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people?
Any other questions? That's a very real question. That's a very good question. Remember, in the book of Genesis, it gives human beings, Adam and Eve, whatever, human beings, the obligation to care for the soil, to care for the land, to care for the earth. We are guardians of the earth. So you can't ask that the earth is an agent acting on its own behalf. We are divinely appointed agents to give Sabbath to the land. The land can't do it by itself. Though, by the way, it is fun when you look at, you go to visit a jungle and you realize there was a civilization there a long time ago, and you see the tree trunks growing up from the walls and all this kind of stuff. The land does have a way of its own restorative justice. If you leave it alone, it's going to take everything the human beings built and turn it into nothing. Turn it into nothing. One of the things that I never did become woke. I don't want to be woke. I barely want to be awakened. When I began to understand in the 60s and 70s how the American banking system conspired against the possibility of African American ownership of land, it just never occurred. Okay, it never occurred to me. It never occurred to me that the banking system could be a system which fundamentally institutionalized poverty for one segment of the population. And the good news is that problem isn't over with. It's not. Getting loans, getting the capability of transfer, inherited wealth, inherited a house to inherit from grandma. Wow. Why do you think that the billionaire sports figures go out and what's the first thing they do? Oh, second thing. The first thing is a Lamborghini. Okay, set that aside.
Uh-huh.
What's the first thing they do? They buy a house for mama. They buy a house for mama. That security didn't exist in their history. And they're starting it here. It's in the text. Inherited wealth is fundamental for institutionalizing poverty. Steve, and then Aviva.
I just want to briefly support capitalism. Point out a few things. There are people who aren't brilliant who destroy family wealth. There are people who come from nothing to become quite wealthy. And the vast majority of huge lottery winners are bankrupt within 3 years. I think capitalism, not warped by things like bank conspiracies and other things, is fine. And that's one of the reasons we need to live by the teachings of tzedakah in the Torah and care for people to help alleviate the circumstances of people who, maybe through no fault of their own, do not have the luxuries that other of us do. But I don't think condemning capitalism is the answer.
Okay, remember, Steve, I am a religious leader. Religious leaders speak in broad religious truths and have yeses and nos and blacks and white. Of course, there's a value to capitalism. My concern is still the same. Individuals can break out, but there are millions who can't.
But we need to fix, there are societal causes for that aren't capitalism, and that we need to fix.
Amen. Amen. Let us go. Aviva.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you can do one-to-one cause to relation to result. Blaming any one institution I find to be complicated. But I also find it interesting that you went back to American history and the use of the banks with regard to the African Americans, when the entire time we were talking about giving to the poor and giving to the widow and giving to the orphan, stems from the fact that Jewish law prohibited women from owning property. So, it is its own restorative thing, but it was truly no different. And there still has to be balance. Our system was set up in such a way that we had created a community that could not provide for itself.
Totally.
I just don't think we have to go any further than the exact cedra that you're talking about to take a look at the fact that we create institutions that are not pluralistic and inclusive.
And Aviva, one of the things that has frustrated me all of my life and at which I failed, how do we bring about systemic change when it's obvious that what you said is correct? How do we bring about systemic change? Okay, I see over here, Merle, and then Brad.
So living where we live, like a mile or so from the Scottsdale Indian Reservation, over the years that we've lived here, the reservation has leased out their land to strip centers, a baseball field. Diamondbacks have their spring training field, like I can walk there. All kinds of whatever happens to be in the strip center. The land has to be the land that you rent. There's car dealerships on it. The land that you rent has to be, you have to maintain it. Whoever owns or manages the strip center, so you become the agents of the land belonging to whatever tribe owns that land. The other thing is that the money that they make from leasing this land to all the different organizations and corporations that rent the land and build on it, there's a community college on it. All that money goes to their children for a good college education. So we're the agents of the land, but we're also providing for them to provide for their younger part of their families. I just thought it was interesting when we were talking about being agents of the land, that we're agents of this land as well. That is right. I mean, it certainly doesn't disturb our neighborhood, but I drive by it every day on the way to my kid's house or on the way to go to some store in one of the strip centers. But we're providing for those families as agents of their land and helping them.
I forget because I'm a newcomer. What was the Dodger Stadium built on?
It might be reservation land. Oh, the Dodger Stadium in LA?
Yes.
I have no clue.
Okay, Rebecca.
There's a great book called Stealing Home. It was land that a lot of Mexican immigrants settled on. Is that correct?
Yeah, but then eventually the land was taken.
Eminent domain.
Absolutely. Great thing, eminent domain. Okay, we're going to go on because there's so much more here. Brad.
Yeah, getting back to Steve's comment, within capitalism, if you look at our tax code, we have what used to be called the estate tax,
Yes.
which was an attempt to deal with inherited wealth. And it's very interesting that estate tax, when was that? Maybe in the 1970s, 80s, all of a sudden it became the death tax. It had a pejorative name associated with
Yes.
it. It went from being a positive thing during the age of the robber barons to a negative thing called the death tax. So that's telling something about our society.
Brad, that actually wasn't the reason for the estate tax.
Okay, wait, Steve, let's not call out, okay? Okay, let's hold up there.
Sorry.
Okay, but there you go. As societies struggle, we want people to be able to earn as much as they can and get what they legally can and morally can. But there's an old Hebrew expression, yesh gavul. There's got to be a limit. There's got to be a way of saying, wait a second, your success must not be built on the pauperization of others. And so you have to find a way. And thank God, our current leaders haven't even found the time to address the issue. Issues that are rotting at the core of society are not nearly as exciting as who won the 2020 election. What a pity that our political leaders don't understand that their role is to address. I'm going to get off my thing here. Let's look at 2510. Look at 2510. Maya, are you there? Maya is off, I think.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Maya, do you have a Bible there? I'd like you to read Leviticus 25:10.
I'm gonna flip to the right page. What page is it?
25:10, Leviticus 25:10.
Sorry. It's not prepared. Do we have a page number in the women's commentary?
It's on. Oh no, I'm not in the women's commentary. Let me just solve the problem.
751.
I'm going to read this, Maya, and see if you recognize it. And you shall hallow the 50th year, proclaim release throughout the land for all its inhabitants. Sometimes translated, proclaim freedom throughout the land to all its inhabitants. Have you ever heard that before, oh student in Philadelphia?
Yes, I have.
Where?
In certain political spheres.
Yeah, in the Liberty Bell. It's written on the Liberty Bell.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. And Maya, it's a bad translation. It isn't what 2510 says. And it's on the Liberty Bell, so we have to believe it's true.
That's
Proclaim liberty
right.
throughout the land to all the inhabitants thereof is obviously a proclamation, anti-slavery, freedom for people, rights of all, human justice. No, actually, it means that the land goes back to its original owner. That's what that verse means in context. But if you rip it out of context, it makes a great Liberty Bell quote. Don't tell people. They think it's a Jewish thing. Let them think it's a Jewish thing. Okay? Isn't that
Aye,
fun?
aye.
Okay? It's kind of like, really? They didn't know? No, they didn't know. So 2510, Tamara?
But it's not only about the land. It starts with the land, but it goes on with each person, each family goes back to its home.
Yes.
It's about releasing people from debts, from slavery. So it's not completely off, but it is different from the usual notion of American freedom. American freedom, people think, oh, it's my right. But the freedom of the biblical text is, it's my responsibility to make sure the people in my community do not sink into irreversible poverty.
My responsibility that my people in my community do not sink into irreversible poverty.
That's what freedom is being proclaimed. Not my freedom, but my responsibility to make sure everybody here remain sustaining.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, there's so much interesting in these little tiny chapters. Last thing, any attitudes about usury, USURY? Do you have any attitudes on usury? For and against? How do you feel about usury? Anyone know what usury is? Brad?
Well, of course we're against. I mean, usury is exorbitant interest rates that are being charged because you can get away with it.
Yeah, interestingly enough, if you read 25, chapter 25, 35, it really is talking about loaning for interest. It isn't about unbridled numbers. The Torah seems to indicate that when someone is in trouble and needs to borrow money from you because they need to pull out of debt, don't charge them interest. That's what it's saying. Usury is not the word in the Torah. It's don't lend money for interest. Rashi. Man's thoughts are greatly attracted by the idea of taking interest, and it becomes difficult to keep people away from charging interest. So he tries to persuade himself that it is a legitimate act. And our text says, V'yareta me'elohecha, fear God. Charging interest to a person in need is wrong. It doesn't say charging exorbitant interest is wrong. Do you know that one of the bases for Jewish survival in the 7th, 8th, and 9th centuries was that Jews could continue to loan money for interest to non-Jews? Look at the passage, and it clearly says if somebody in your family, your tribe, the people, are in need, don't charge them interest. It doesn't say don't charge interest to anybody else. The basis for the Jewish banking houses in Europe, 7th, 8th, 9th century, was that Jews could loan money on interest to non-Jews. Until in the late 800s, whatever it was, the church, realizing that it was losing out on an economic burden, changed the church's policy about loaning for interest and tried to drive the Jewish bankers out of the market. I mean, it's sort of like the owners of McDonald's get control of a city and shut down all the Burger Kings. It's a good way to eliminate competition. Where does this rule still complicate international commerce? In the Muslim world. The Muslim ban on loaning for interest is far stricter than the Jewish ban or how Christians handle it. Based on the same teachings, Muslims are firmly opposed to loaning money for interest. The good news is that they discovered the Jewish technique of creating legal fictions. So now there are international banking systems run by Muslims which totally obey Sharia law, that you can't loan for interest, but on the other hand, because it's done through third parties, it's not really loaning for interest, and the world's economy chugs along. But isn't it fun to contemplate how this rule, dating from whatever, 400 BCE, who knows, in 2024 is still a factor in international commerce. I just thought you would find that interesting. I did. It says that under Sharia law, riba, R-I-B-A, is forbidden. Many Muslim scholars believe that riba is always forbidden. Thank goodness for the Muslim economies, they don't control the banks. So here we are. By the way, riba is also a Hebrew word for loaning on interest. But it is the actual title, the name, the category in Sharia law of loaning for interest. Well, we have certainly wandered across a small chapter with a huge amount to be studied. And I thank you for that. We're going to go into Kaddish now. And may I be among the first to wish happy birthday to Kabbalah and Zohar. And a lot to think about today. A lot to think about.
Comments about COVID.
COVID what?
COVID, when they gave money for COVID and the student loan
Forgiveness?
are leveling the field today.
Student loan forgiveness. Yeah, yeah, it's complicated, right? It is complicated. Okay, we're going to go to Kaddish now. Next week we get all the good curses. We could enjoy that. We mentioned those who have passed away during the past month. Chet Cohn, Gene Gans, Glenn Golenberg, Harold Lurie, Jerry Malamud, Ronald Migdal, Richard Polanski, Gail Rund, Michael Schwartz, Dana Schwartz, Doris Silver, Arthur Weiner, Norma Jean Weiner, Harriet Weintraub. And the following, the anniversaries of whose deaths occurred during this past week: Candace Abel, Henry Bacon, Lena Barkan, Irving Barron, Jessica Bayer, Jenny Berman, Lillian Berman, Sarah Bloom, Harvey Balmont, Janice Brooks, Ann Brown, Sandra Brown, Vanessa Brown, Janice Catafo, Jack Cohn, Morton Cohn, Marion Corday, Sally Dickman, Gordon Dishler, Jack Epstein, Mary Epstein, Gerald Fetterman, Rabbi Morley Feinstein. Last night there was a brief glitch because I have the published list and it doesn't have his name with the title Rabbi. And Kareth interrupted the flow of the service to insist that he be referred to properly as Rabbi. Robert Feldman, Regina Fisher, Bernard Friedman, Sybil Frischling, Doris Frost, Norman Gallup, Samuel Gary, Stephen Glasgow, Elaine Goldsmith, Evelyn Gordon, Phil Gore, Richard Gross, Samuel Goober, Leo Gutman, Betty Handelman, Ella Hausmann, Stanley Heisler, Leo Holt, Sam Horn, Barbara Hornichter, Max Kay, Gary Kelson, Jeanette Kerner, Leonard Koenig, Irv Kolpas, Samuel Koran, Lillian Kaczynski, Esther Lowent, Hi Leonard, Loretta Leonard, Eric Lesson, Victor Ludwig, Lenore Meltzer, Edna Mosk, Yvonne Nash, Donald Optican, Mitzi Pollack, Arthur Platt, Richard Pollard, Madeline Price, Stephen Redinger, Harris Robinson, Frida Rosenberg, Esther Schulman, Michael Shapiro, Bertha Shapiro, Myron Sholem, Nettie Shrelo, Sidney Siegel, Lauren Silberkleit, Jenny Stein, Harry Steinberg, Selma Stone, Samuel Touche, Shirley Touche, Susan Touche, Sylvia Vicio, Ernest Warsaw, Sheila Wegg, Murray Weingrad, Geraldine Walworth, Joanne Wolfe, Sarah Wharton, Melvin Weinkoff. We bear in mind as well the names of all those who died in defense of the United States of America, those who died in defense of the state of Israel, those who died through senseless acts of terror, those for whom there is no one to say Kaddish. If you would like to speak any other names at this point, please do. Speak them aloud or speak them in your hearts.
Alan Schlossberg.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. V'yalma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon of yomechon. V'chayedechol beit Yisrael. Ba'galav izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mavorach v'yalom le'omei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach. V'yitba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal. Shmei Kudusha, Brichu, Leila, Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata, Tushbachata V'Nechamata, Da'amiran Bi'alma V'Imru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chayim Aleinu, V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Imru Hu, Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. May God, who makes peace in the high places, make peace in our hearts, make peace in our homes, make peace in the household of Israel, make peace among all the families and nations of earth. And let us say,
Amen.
Shabbat
Amen.
shalom, everybody. Love you.
Shalom, thank you.
Thank you for today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.
You too.
Shabbat shalom.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.